Welcome to another episode of the Hack My Age podcast. Wow, I can't believe it's the end of July. Crazy. We're in the middle of summer. And if you are interested in joining an amazing group, we've got the Biohacking Menopause group for August. I know a lot of you guys may be traveling or doing your things, but if you're on the quest to understand how to manage your menopause, how to biohack it all, join us because we have some really great live Q&A speakers. We have Dr. Sarah Ballantyne. She is a researcher more than anything, a nutritionist, and her jam is all about nutrient-dense foods, what to eat during menopause. Then we have Jody Harrison Bauer. She's a great influencer on Instagram. She's got her own podcast, and she is one of the oldest Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. Right. She's going to talk about body composition and changes in menopause. And then we have Dr. Indra Barathon, who is our in-house functional medicine doctor, to answer your questions on your hormone therapy or on your routines and your gut health, et cetera, et cetera. So join us there. The links are in the show notes. And you can also take the menopause quiz. I've been getting really great feedback. A lot of ladies like this because it just helps you understand what phase of menopause are you in, and you get a little bit insight on yourself and then what to do next. At the end of the quiz, you get some little biohacks for whatever stage that you're in. So go and check that out. That's always on the first page of the hackmyage.com website, but it's also the link in the show notes too. So if you haven't yet rated and reviewed the podcast, please do. I so appreciate it. Thank you for those of you who are already given reviews in Apple Podcast, in Spotify, wherever it is. Just takes 2 seconds to go and leave a review, 5 stars, hopefully, and even if it's just a one word review, that's awesome. And this today, I'd love to share a wonderful little review that we got from Lisa. She calls me the master biohacker. And she says, Zora is extremely educated and goes out of the box to find everything underneath the sun on how to optimize yourself from perimenopause into menopause and beyond. And she tries to help women live a fulfilling and vivacious life. Yes, that is absolutely true. So thank you, Lisa, for that. And before I introduce my guest, I would love to invite you to go to YouTube if you're not watching this already on YouTube, because this guest that I have, Dr. Lindsey Berkson, is incredible. She's 76 years old. You're going to see she looks amazing, and she's so vibrant, and who is she? Let's talk about Dr. Lindsey Berkson. She's an amazing integrative practitioner. She's an agile thinker. You're going to see it. You're going to feel it. You're going to hear it. She's done tons of clinical, academic, and scientific research, and she's got loads of experience. She's been practicing in the health and wellness space for about 5 decades. She's been around for a while, and she's a true pioneer in the functional medicine space. And I really hope you're watching the video in YouTube, because she's just a shining example of how to hack your age. And the cards were definitely not set up for her to live really long. She's going to share that story with us. And it's amazing to hear what she did. And it's amazing that she's here with us today. So we had such an amazing conversation. I highly recommend you to go follow her. We didn't follow any of my planned questions, not one bit. So she really took the mic and went to town and gave us so much great information. And we wound up talking mostly about hormone disruptors. And she shared her own personal journey with DES. I'm not sure if I'm going to even say this right. It's Diethylstilbestrol, but short DES. And she talks about how that downregulates tumor suppressor genes. And then we talked about gender bending. I never even heard that word. Infertility, cancer, toxic exposures. She talked about the de-evolution of humanity. She talked about what she, as a 76-year-old, I think she said she's turning 76, but anyways, we learned what she's doing to hack her age. She showed us how to lower exposure to the hormone disruptors and what is the most disruptive toxic element, and why most doctors don't understand hormones in menopause. And towards the end, we talked a little bit about menopause and hormones and how to find the best menopause doctor for you. So she's really one of those amazing doctors who just kind of goes against the grain and fights for better health care. And she's also known for specializing in really complex cases, high risk hormonal patients, and severe gastroenterologic cases. She's one of those doctors who teaches doctors on what to do in those really, really difficult cases. She's been in practice since the mid 1970s and is an integrative nutritional, gastrointestinal, and endocrine specialist since the early 1980s. And she now works remotely. I think she said she's in Texas. She's a consultant, and she can also work with your own doctors and become part of your personalized healthcare team. But what I really love about her is not only that she's got tons of vitality, but she's always keeping up on the science of nutrition, hormones, and health. She's reading the literature. She's going through all of the research day by day, and she interprets it for us. She's got her own podcast, blog articles. I don't know how many books, but she's got a lot of them. And she's always churning out the webinars, mostly for health practitioners, because she's pretty heavy on the science. But if you like the science, you've got to go watch some of the things she's putting out there. Subscribe to her newsletter, and I'll have links to all of these things in the show notes. And what's more is that she's been a peer-reviewed published researcher with the University of Texas Medical School at Houston, free radical biology and medicine. So there's just her bio is so long, I can't even go through the rest of it. So I'm just going to cut it short here so we can get started. So now let's get started with the show. So it's a real pleasure to have Dr. Lindsey Berkson on the show today. Welcome.
So glad to be here. Always love to have conversations that are helpful for women.
Oh, I'm so honored that you're here today, and I encourage every woman to go and follow everything that you do. I'll have links to all of that in the show notes and how to find you. But because you've been a leader in this world of hormones and menopause for a long time, and you're also well known for some challenging cases. And I'm just shocked. You just told me how old you were, 78, almost 78.
No, I'm going to be 76 in December.
76 in December. Mind blowing. Please, guys, go to the YouTube video. This is what aging looks like, and it's very attractive, and I'm really excited about it. So I do want to hear your story a little bit, just to give people background on your own health challenges. And you had breast cancer, and we're going to talk a little bit about the whole.
I didn't get into health, though, for my health challenges. Had nothing to do with my health challenges. It was just common sense. I was like in my teens, and I went to a Theosophical Society meeting, and Scott Nearing and his wife, Helen, who was a famous violinist, and he was a PhD in sociology from the University of Pennsylvania. And he stood up for children who were being abused in child labor laws. Children were just a way to get a lot of work done and not have to pay them very much money. So he was the first person who stood up for kids, and he got blackballed, because whoever does anything first often gets blackballed. So then he went to the Northeast and started the organic gardening movement. And I heard he was speaking, wanted to see a gentleman. What was organic gardening? This is almost, I don't know, 50, 60 some years ago. And he said, your body's a temple. You are what you eat. What you put in good stuff, get out bad stuff, and it makes a difference how you get to live your life. So from then on, it was common sense. It wasn't that I was ill and I needed to be knocked on the head to wake up. And then I got into yoga, and I got into detoxing, and the Beatles had just come back from the Maharishi and meditation. And there was the understanding that we existed in a mind, body, spirit continuum. So I went and lived in India and lived in yoga ashrams. And then I just started getting sick as I was detoxing, doing gratitude, eating organic. I started getting cancers and having a lot of health issues.
Opposite of what should happen. I mean,
because it's not all about what you eat. It's not all about your life. It's what your parents ate and their grandparents ate, and what your mother was exposed to when she was pregnant with you, and the egg and the sperm prior to it even coming together. We're a lineage of humanity. We are a community of a connect the dots of mankind. And our health and body, mind, and spirit starts back in our family constellations. So at the time, I didn't know this. I thought, I'm doing everything right, like you just said,
Mhm.
but getting the wrong outcomes. Why would that be? So I happened to read an article and that the planet was starting to be encased in pollutants that can assault our hormones. And when I just started school, I had a master's in nutrition, I had a BA in psychoneurobiology and one in communication. So I've always been in science and in speaking and in lecturing. But then I went to a dual program of chiropractic and naturopathic medicine, and then ended up being a scientist at an estrogen think tank because I wrote one of the very first books on endocrine disruption. Because I read this article that the planet was being encased. And 50 years ago, my first rotation in integrative medicine was with Dr. Jonathan Wright, who's credited with being the father of bioidentical hormones. So he was saying hormones rule the body. They're not just about reproductive and sexy things. Wherever a hormone signals, it affects the tissues, and it's your brain, your vocal cords, your lungs, it's your kidneys, it's everything. So we're starting to look at hormones early on. And then a book came out by Chilton Pierce called The De-Evolution of Mankind, saying we're really reversing evolution. And these are the reasons why. And one of them was endocrine disrupting compounds. So I started to write a book called Hormone Deception, which at that time, no one in the lay public knew what an endocrine disruptor was. There wasn't any paper on it anywhere. I had to go to all the scientific conferences where the scientists were just starting to chat about what they were seeing in nature, that male alligators were becoming feminized and growing eggs, and female alligators in Lake Apopka were starting to grow male genitalia and penises. That's where gender bending came from, was from exposure to pollutants. And so I wrote this book that took 6 years of, and I went to medical conferences for 15 years that were all the scientists unveiling this story. And they had a think tank at Tulane, which was the epicenter of these scientists saying, hey, hormones really dictate the healthy humanity, and hormones are under attack. So it was an environmental estrogen tank, a think tank called the Center for Bioenvironmental Research, and it was run by John McLaughlin, who at the time was one of the world's experts on estrogen. And also the scientists who discovered how hormones work. Elwood Jensen discovered the first receptor ER alpha, and Yanaki Gustafsson discovered the second receptor ER beta. And I got to hang out with them and hear what they thought and work there off and on for quite a number of years. And every year we put on a conference, first called Estrogens and the Environment, and ultimately the last few years it was called Hormone. And environmental health science deans from universities around the country and researchers would come and share their information about what was happening. But as I was writing Hormone Deception, the model compound of how a chemical might be the kryptonite for your hormones was based on a human tragedy, a phenomena that John, who ran that think tank, was the scientist that unfolded what was going on. And there were a group of moms in Boston area whose daughters at 15, 16, 17 years old started to get a very rare form of vaginal cancer called clear cell vaginal adenocarcinoma. And it was a weird cancer to be getting a clump of these young ladies getting it. And nobody could figure out what was going on. And John was a postdoc, and he was in the elevator with a group of these moms that were all talking to each other like, what the F is going on? My daughter has this horrific cancer, and I've always eaten well and done everything right. I go to church, I go to temple. So they started saying to each other, did you take some prenatal vitamins? Did you get an injection with this drug called Diethylstilbestrol? The nickname or acronym was DES. And John was standing in the elevator and heard these moms started to ask each other these questions. And up until that time, the womb was considered completely separate from the body of the soon-to-be mom. So doctors would come on TV and encourage women to smoke to relax because they didn't think cigarette smoke got into the fetus. Do whatever you want. Go ahead. I don't even know why we listen to experts anymore, because whatever the experts say changes so much. The whole concept of expert is, I think it's because we're so hypochondriacal, because fear has been used to run us, that we're seeking, some voices of reason. But a lot of times experts aren't necessarily truly experts. But at that point in time, the womb was considered separate from the mom. So the mom during pregnancy could do whatever the heck she wanted. And John said, hey, wait a second. These moms in the elevator, they were talking about some exposures they had when they were pregnant. And I want to check this out and see what they were exposed to and see if this was causing the next generation to have these rare cancers. And when he told this to his postdoc advisor, he was told, look, if the womb is separate from the mom, you better go get a part-time job as a janitor. No one's ever going to hire you as a PhD, because whoever says the first thing is often, just like Scott Nearing coming out with organic gardening and everyone's banging him on the head. The pioneers leading the way get vilified a lot. And that's just an isness of life on planet Earth soaring through space. But it turned out that from 1938 to 1971, almost 40 million pregnant women were exposed to this brand new, exciting synthetic estrogen that was 50 times more powerful than our own endogenous, or our man-made 17 beta estradiol. It was this hugely powerful estrogen. It was synthetic, and it was invented by Sir Charles Dodds, who also is credited with inventing plastics, because this estrogen looked a lot like plastic. And we know that plastics are very estrogenic, and they were the first form of endocrine disruptors that were studied. So it turned out that diethylstilbestrol was the model compound of understanding that chemicals that surround our environment, or are in our environment, in our air, food, and water, can threaten our hormones. And hormones in the womb set up the genetic deal of the cards for your life, your intelligence, your behavior, your parenting skills. It does. Hormones really tell genes what kind of adult and human being you will be. But if the egg and the sperm and the placenta and mother's milk are filled with chemicals, that diethylstilbestrol was the first model compound. And now we know that the developing fetus is in a sea of these chemicals. In the amniotic fluid, there have been hundreds of these chemicals identified in, quote, healthy American women. So I started getting these odd cancers, and nobody knew what to do with me. I got the first form of this one breast cancer that no one else had ever had in the United States. So suddenly I became the world's expert on this breast cancer. Who wants to be an expert of a cancer you've just been diagnosed with? Nobody. And then I had this very rare kidney cancer. And then I lost my adrenal gland because I asked him to leave it in. But in those days, they really didn't like to leave the adrenal gland in. It takes more time to tease apart the arteries going to the adrenal gland. So I've ended up living this big life with a raisin of only one adrenal gland. But I realized that when I started studying the research of diethylstilbestrol, that animals in the laboratory were getting the same rare cancers I was. That was an epiphany. And no doctor could figure that out. I mean, it was only from diving into literature. And John had also invited me, based on my book, Hormone Deception, to be a distinguished scholar. He also invited me to get a free PhD, but I just had breast cancer. So I was, this is 33 years ago. There wasn't a lot known about breast cancer. And most of the time you had these disfiguring, horrific surgeries. So I didn't know what my lifespan was going to be. I didn't know I was going to live and become this old, crusty old fart that I am today. So I didn't do that at the time. But so I went to Research Triangle Park, and Retha Newbold was in charge of a lot of the research on diethylstilbestrol, and she saved my life. Retha saved my life. Talking to the researchers that do the research around all this stuff, So that was the big deal when I worked at Tulane at the CBR. I got to talk to the scientists moving the needle on all this stuff. So I went to Retha and I said, Retha, I had this weird breast cancer. I've had this weird kidney cancer, and I'm growing more tumors all the time, not all of them cancer. And I did everything right, but nothing's coming out right. And I ended up in bed for a year after my adrenal gland was taken out. So she said, well, our theory at this time, I said, what do you think is going on? You're the scientist. She said, our theory is that the exposure to this hugely endocrine disrupting chemical in the womb does many negative things, setting up the genes in that child to not be able to fight off cancer, as well as many other things. I'm not going to go through everything now, but just focus on this one aspect of endocrine disruption in utero or in the womb. So she said, one of the things we think is that it tamps down your grand-am tumor suppressor gene, which is called the P53 gene. And this gene is the big honcho, and it helps your immune system have eyes to see cancer and inform your immune system, get it, get that cancer. If P53 is faulty, you're more likely to allow a cancer cell to grow, because we all have cancers that cells that show up here and there all the time, but we're supposed to have these cancer fighting mechanisms watching our back. So she said, we think P53 is disarmed. So my goal became, how do I reboot P53? And then she also said a number of other things. I had noticed that there were some cytokines, molecules that control health, and when they're in excess, damage health. And they're called, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but human transforming growth factor beta 1, galectin 3. They're these polysyllabic cytokines. I've got some podcasts for free. People can listen to what they are on my website. But she said, we know that in DES offspring, these molecules are sky high, and they suppress the immune system too. So that children born to these women that got this exposure in the first month of the trimester of their pregnancy, depending on the amount they got and the timing of the exposure, they have a bigger risk of a lot more cancers and a lot more issues, and infertility. That was the first big well-known thing, was infertility. And then gender bending. There were articles, are these people born to women who took this, are they more apt to never get married, more apt to really want to be a different sex? So, no one's mentioning this with trans and what's going on with this newer generation body dysphoria phenomena that we're seeing. But at Tulane, one of the big discussions we had several major questions we never answered, but we debated from every which side. And one of them was, is gender bending coming down the road, and is more cancer, coming down the road, and is more infertility coming down the road, because of these compounds that are in the planet because of profit from big corporation. And that's why we want politicians that talk about this, and we don't want politicians who are just run by those big corporations, because then your children and grandchildren are more prone to cancer. So anyway,
How does a woman get exposed to DES during the 1938 to 71?
71. So in 71, it was banned as the most powerful cancer-causing class 1 carcinogen ever invented. So there were 365 prenatal vitamins that they put it in at the time, in prenatal vitamins, to make a normal pregnancy more normal. So one, it was prenatal vitamins, but the biggest exposure was if a woman started to spot and it looked like she was threatening a miscarriage, whereas today we might give her progesterone or something like that. They gave her a shot of DES. So my mother got 2 shots. Once I figured all this out, I wrote away from my mother's microfiche films from Michael Reese Hospital, which I got them just before they were shredded. 6 months later, the hospital shut down. I was so lucky to get this. And right there, when I tore open the manila envelope, there was the microfiche records, and she had 2 shots of DES, and she was on prenatal vitamins that contained DES, and it was all in her records. It was extraordinary in those day and age. They did track those kind of things, and they used diethylstilbestrol in a lot of the teaching hospitals, because when a big drug comes out, they teach it to med students, and med students start pushing this new big drug, which is why you always want to be very wary of any new big drug. I certainly, with this experience in my life, I couldn't have children. I had multiple cancers, and I had a horrible time with many aspects of health, battling blindness. But there's many papers written on how endocrine disruptors cause obesity, and that DES offspring have a much higher incidence of insulin resistance and obesity. So you have to work out more and eat less and live a strategic life, because your genes have set you up to be a bigger person. And that's well established in the literature. And it's one of the contributions that we have to the obesity epidemic. But anyway, so in the womb, women could get a prenatal vitamin. They could get an injection, but also DES was dumped in feedlots of animals. If a woman ate a fair amount of meat, it marbles and makes meat taste incredible. And it's now been made illegal since 1971, but it's still used illegally in meat. When I was at Tulane, Sweden had just gotten a huge shipment of American meat, and they're one of the few countries that still test for DES in red meat. And
Wow.
they reached out to John and said, this meat is just laced with DES. We're sending it back. And John wanted me to do a investigative journalism deal on it, but I was doing something else at the time. And I just finished writing Hormone Deception, which took 6 years, and I wasn't up to that task. But we don't
Incredible.
realize how much we can get things, hidden in our foods. Like wine has maybe almost 56 chemicals that are grandfathered in wine that don't need to be on the label in American wine, which European wine doesn't have. I mean, we have thousands of additives in our food, whereas in Europe, they only have a few hundred. And this all contributes to our health or lack of it. And we want politicians that care about this, because our children are so ill, and it's not about finding another drug and making more profits for a company. But DES is such a model of, now, mind you, the public health tragedy of DES, because multiple millions of women and their offspring, the effects are transgenerational. So now we're seeing for the very first time in DES grandkids and great grandkids. We're
Wow.
seeing ovarian cancer at 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. It's rare, but we're seeing, like, I think there's about 11 to 13 documented cases. Who heard of ovarian cancer in a young
13-year-old.
little
Yeah.
kid, right?
It's incredible. So the what I'm curious now is, how did you detox yourself? Because this sounds very powerful. That's one question. And the
You
next
can't
one,
detox this out. You
yeah,
can't detox it out, but you can do many things to reboot the damage of it, because the exposure is in the womb. So by the time you figure it out in your 20s and 30s, but I was lucky with yoga. I was just doing so much detox, but it's not like it's detoxing out. Your damage from DES is set up in the womb. So what you then have to do is figure out, how is it damaged, and then what do you do to offset that damage, which was a huge amount of research. And I'm on lots and lots of different things, which I've ended up specializing as an educational consultant for cancer patients and renal patients. I ended up working in a dialysis center for 10 years with Jack Moncrief, who co-invented the home unit of dialysis, and we invented a drug for dialysis patients. So because I only had one kidney, and when it was removed, my other kidney suddenly wasn't doing great. So these experiences got me into cancer patients and renal patients, because I was trying to help myself. And then, of course, I'm a healer, so I want to use that information and help others. And when you've been on both sides of the desk, so you've been a doctor and a patient, it's a very different experience, because most doctors are young and healthy. And I mean, most OBGYNs don't even realize the power of menopause till they even become menopausal themselves, because it's human nature not to understand things unless you've gone through them often
Mhm.
yourself.
It's incredible how powerful that DES is, but I also, we
It's
know
not taught in any schools. That's
it's
what the point I was trying. It is
crazy.
no longer taught in med schools, public health schools, naturopathic schools. Nobody, when I go see doctors today, I say I'm a DES daughter, and they look at me with a deer in the headlight look, unless they're in their 70s and they're still working.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that terrible?
It's terrible. It's amazing you're alive,
It
considering
is.
everything you went through, and not alive. I mean, alive and kicking, and you're thriving. Your health, to me, from everything I've learned about you, you really are thriving and a model of good health as we're aging. So I'm guessing that everything you've done is contributing to this where you are today. And if you didn't do it, maybe you wouldn't even be here. So I'm more.
I think that's really right. I think I think that's exactly right.
Well,
Yeah.
well done. Thank God you took care of yourself. So we would have had this conversation and learned so much. But what about the endocrine disruptors that are happening? I mean, that we have today. I mean, we now back then it wasn't talked about very much, and now we're all talking about endocrine disruptors, but they don't even seem half as powerful as DES, or are they?
Oh, no, they are. And there's a lot of synergy and additivity, although, yeah, that's a whole nother story. Pretty much there's more and more papers coming out that our obesity epidemic, our osteoporosis epidemic, our cancer epidemic, many of our issues, our children with behavioral issues, emotional issues, violence, gun issues, not most things are multifactorial. Most things are multiple um, parts of a storm making a perfect storm. But endocrine disruptors are now recognized as one of the major contributors to the decline and de-evolution of humanity, exactly like Sheldon Pierce wrote in that book, The De-Evolution of Man. And if you want a healthy child and a healthy home, you've got to figure out how to reduce endocrine disrupting exposure. It doesn't have to be 100%, but just 25 to 50%, as I write in Hormone Deception, when they look at, for example, Finnish farmers and look to see who's got great sperm and who doesn't have great sperm. If they just ate 25% of their diet is organic, they had better sperm. If they ate 50% of their diet is organic, they had even better sperm. You don't have to be perfect, but you got to start moving the needle, because all this stuff is getting into us and it's making a difference for our health. Uh, Microplastics in our arteries now, it's supposed to be 4 times more powerful to increase our risk of stroke than lipid status is. But then also what we are giving our generations after us. We've never had it where we are seeing the shortening of lifetime and the worsening of maternal health and first year infant health. And we are at the bottom of the heap of a lot of this. And a fair amount of this, of course, it's multiple reasons, but a fair amount of this is endocrine disruption. So in my book, Hormone Deception, the last third of the book is, how do I get this stuff out of me? You know, what do I do in my home, my office, my supermarket cart? There's steps to do without driving yourself crazy. And remediation in the planet and our lives is possible. At these Hormone conferences we put on, a lot of the deans of environmental health sciences that would come and share their data got very, very maudlin and felt the earth was beyond the point of no return. We're doomed. And there was this negative distraught, a collective scientific distraught over what endocrine disruptors were going to do to humanity, let alone fertility, which of course is how we evolve and go on, which no doctors were translating into their clinical practice. So John, being the incredible human being that he is, John had the last Hormone conference be a call for remediation. How do we get this stuff out of our planet and out of our body? And there were so many ways to do this, but you need regulatory action passed and you need money to do that. And you need politicians who think this is worth it and that aren't totally bought with votes from the very companies that are making the glyphosate and products that are in our air, food, and water, and damaging your egg, sperm, placenta, and your next generations. And it is a connect the dots, but it starts at home. And there's tons of things that you can do on your own, even though it's challenging. And you can do one or two things a month so you don't go crazy, but it's really worth in terms of strategic living, to live longer and better. You want to minimize your and your family and your patients' exposures to endocrine disrupting compounds. And you want to have some way that on an ongoing daily basis, you're cleaning them out of your body. So I actually spent years designing two products for biotics scientific research that clear the receptors where a lot of these chemicals sit, so your hormones can't work right. That's why they're hormone disruptors. And then also help protect you against cancer and a lot of the negative aspects that are occurring today. So I created two products to try and daily clean out our constant 24/7 exposure. You sit in a room and the sheetrock is outgassing, and the carpet or the floor, even the engineered wood is outgassing, or the glue that the real wood was put down with is outgassing. Your computer has plastic components, and those are aerosolizing and outgassing. It's a 24/7 deal in today's very convenient contemporary society, but the price is high. So we need a way to figure out how to detox.
Mhm.
And that comes back to your question with detox earlier, I think. And now this is a great time of talking about that. So I think regular detox to keep yourself younger longer, and you can do it in so many different ways, is an important aspect of having your cellular energy stay vital.
And what do you do? Like the top 3 things you do to detox yourself?
Well, I take receptor detox, and that's my product that I made to clear off receptors that are satellite dishes that hormones are looking for on target tissue. And once a month I do 4 twice a day on Saturday and Sunday with food. Just that's an easy detox, receptor detox, 4 twice a day, Saturday and Sunday, 1 weekend a month. And then I do 1 twice a day every day to just clear off those receptors. And I also do a exercise that makes me sweat a lot. So I'm a kayaker, and I formed a kayaking club in Austin. Everybody's 25, 35 years younger than me. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep doing this. We do really heavy kayaking runs, and in the last 2 weeks, I've kayaked like maybe 8, 9 times. One time, 7 miles around the perimeter of a lake in water that's very resistant from either waves from jet skis or after rains where there's a lot of silt in the water. And I'm just sweating up a storm, and sweat really detoxes you out. That's why a red sauna. But getting an exercise that you love. It could be dancing, it could be hot yoga, it could be whatever you want. But most women come in to see me, and I say, "What do you do for exercise?" And they say, "Walk." I mean, that's the typical, which is good. It's definitely good. But walking doesn't usually get you sweating. So I say, put some 1-pound weights on your ankles and your wrists, up the ante and get yourself sweating, because sweating detoxes you.
Mm.
That's one of the things. So something that detoxes you. And then
What if somebody, I don't know if you remember, probably 2 decades ago, people were wearing these suits in the heat to try to sweat. And I think it was, in the end, it was kind of dangerous because it would pass out. But what about somebody who's walking? And I'm totally on board with you. I mean, I think breaking out in a sweat is really important, and other types of exercise, which are important for other reasons of aging. But let's say somebody is walking, wants to stick with their walking, but they want to sweat. Could they wear layers or do it in the heat or without going overheating? Is that it?
they
Is
could
that
do whatever they want to do. People
as
don't
long
need
as
to
they
really
sweat?
be told to do. It's nice for you to kind of think on your own, what might make me sweat. Some people say they just get outside and walk rapidly and they sweat, or they do 40 steps of walking and 40 rapid steps, whatever gets you sweating. But I always say it's good to do whatever you really like to do, because that's what you'll continue to do.
Mhm.
So is it dancing? Is it kayaking? Is it speed, is it walking with girlfriends where you have speed walking alternating with walking? Because that would get you sweating. It's just going faster. But
Mhm.
I think whatever you do, you just want to do something you really enjoy, because we have so much angst in the world today because fear has been a tool that's tried to control us. So everybody's so fearful. So I think you need to have vitamin F fun. You really, it's important to enjoy your life and not just worry about every single little sentence and crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And that, so it's always good to have some exercise you do that you really enjoy, and you get to hang out with a community you really like. I go to the gym every day, so you have a community there, or you might have a walkers community. I just learned about an app yesterday called Sweat Pals, and this app is in every single city, and it'll tell you everything that's going on: kayaking, meditation, yoga class, hot yoga class, this, that. You get to figure out singles working things. So there's apps these days that connect you to so many different things. If anyone can't find anything to do, there's so many ways to have fun and to sweat. Then what's going on with your spirit? You don't need to be told what to do. Just think, what do you really enjoy doing, and figure out a way to do that in a way that would also be exercise. I think I loved water, anything water. So
Mhm.
I'm a dancer. I've been dancing all my life, but I ended up having an issue as I've gotten older with my foot. So now I've gone to kayaking because it's upper body instead of lower body. So the problem with a lot of people, and I see this in my patients all the time, is they'll get an injury and then they'll identify with that injury and they stop right there. They'll say, I have a bad back. When did this happen? In high school, when I was playing football. How old are you now? I'm 48, but this was in high school. His identity is this bad back, and now he moves through the world with a bad back, and he can't. If you have something that doesn't work, then work another body part. Never let your body stop moving. It's an excuse. People say I have a bad knee, so I can't go to the gym. I'm in the middle of a lawsuit. I got my daughter's wedding. I really couldn't work out. I started eating a lot more sugar. I don't have those kind of things. I just live my life where exercise is part of it, no matter what is going on in my life. So I had a big clinic in California where I had 30 employees. It was one of the first functional multidisciplinary clinics in the country. And we had one of the first functional cardiologists in the country. And I had to drive through traffic to get there. We started our meetings at 7. So I joined um, I think it was called Every Time Fitness, or all 24-hour fitness. That was the name of it, 24-hour fitness. So it was open 24 hours. So I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and go work out, and then go, get dressed and go to the meeting at 7 o'clock after I went through all that gridlock traffic. I just fit it in no matter what. And that's what you got to do with exercise. It's got to be something that's non-negotiable, like brushing your teeth. You don't stop it because there's A, B, C, or D going on in your life. And then that's a different body. To
Mhm.
inhabit a life in a body that you're constantly moving and also sweating, even if you're ill, because I've been ill at plenty times, or I couldn't get out of bed. But then in bed, I'm doing some exercises with my feet. I have small weights so I don't completely atrophy. You always have to be strategic with whatever life is throwing on your plate in front of you.
You sound just like me. I am also a dancer. I'm dealing with hip osteoarthritis. So now I do a lot of upper body. I still do my rehab exercises.
What
The
kind of dance? What kind of dance?
I'm one of these hip hop type pop type dancing. So I
Ah,
tried the ballet. I've tried a lot of other disciplines, but I like lady style. I like what you see in the videos, and I'm a '70s kid, so I love that, and I'm going back to it. But in the meantime, until I deal with figure out if I'm going to get a surgery or do something else, I'm working up a lot of the upper body, and I have that mentality too. And people say, how is it that you're so disciplined? And I said, well, I just wake up in the morning and I don't think about, should I brush my teeth or not brush my teeth? You just do it, right? It's a habit that I've created most of my life. And I think it's one of those things you just don't ask yourself. You do, and like you said, you do what you enjoy because you're more likely to stick with it. I'm on board with you 100%. And the other thing I mentioned, I don't know if you've heard about blood flow restriction bands or Katsu bands. This is wonderful. When you're injured, you have surgery, it activates the growth hormone. So it helps a lot of people who are in that state where they cannot move, or their muscles atrophy, like you say, and it goes so fast. It takes so hard to build up, and then it goes really quickly. So I've added that in as well. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what we talked about, sweating and exercise. There are two things. There's getting hydrated and getting your electrolytes in, as well as protein or essential amino acids. How are you doing this yourself? Or
Well, first of all, this whole thing of worrying exactly how much protein you need, how much we are so hypochondriacal. I mean, I was on a date the other night. I'm still dating. And this guy pulls out and he goes, well, I've got my Aura ring, so I know how much I REM sleep. I've got this, I've got that. And he's going through his phone, showing me every single exercise move of whatever you do. And, we are so detail oriented. If you want to be that detail oriented, fine. But, if you go back to the basics, in my opinion, and you eat a whole food diet, and if you depending on which proteins agree with you, it's always good to do a food reactivity test to know which foods are your kryptonite or not, or a comprehensive stool test and know if your gut is working well and if you need digestive enzyme assistance. So, the gut is kind of complex. So I don't mean to totally simplify it. I have a book out called Healthy Digestion the Natural Way that sold 1 million copies. And I've been lumbering and working way too long on this textbook that I've been working on the gut. But if you have at a meal a protein and a complex carb and at least you don't need to eat 3 meals a day. That's ridiculous. That's what got us into this whole mess. 3 meals a day, please spare me. Eat when you're hungry. Eat when you're hungry. You don't need to always have 3 meals a day. The whole dictums where people tell you exactly what you should do. It's really kind of nutty, this concept of expert. I always tell my patients, if you want to try a much higher protein, lower carb diet, do that for a week or a month, then try another diet and see how you feel. Everybody is really different. But basically what I try and do is just get in some protein, and I always get in 4 or 5 or 6 veggies. I eat a lot of vegetables a day. I had lunch with a famous functional doctor here, wonderful woman, Eleanor, about a year ago, and she says everybody over 50, nobody can eat raw foods. No, and I ordered this big salad, and of course I was really much older than my 50s. And so everybody's got these dictums. I think you find which foods you enjoy and which foods work for you, and you should have at least a handful of protein twice a day. If I'm kayaking a huge amount, I might up my protein a little bit to accommodate it. But people get into such worry about things. And I really think I know I love biohacking. I was just at a biohacking um, brunch with these wonderful young biohackers that had come into Austin, where we have so many podcasters, and we have the wonderful Dave Asprey, who's amazing. I went to his fabulous New Year's Eve party this year. It was really great to go there. And they just came back from this huge biohacking conference that Dave put on in Dallas with all these anti-aging hacks. So I said, well, so tell me, did anybody talk about hormones? No. What about hormones? They think of hormones as just doing with pregnancy or with sex. But what do hormones have to do with aging, right? And I said, so what was the age of the speakers at this biohacking conference? And the oldest speaker, who was this really famous anti-aging guy who does look really great, he's 44. So I said, I hate to say this, but I kind of want to hear great anti-aging advice from people who were in their late 70s and 80s and 90s and still going strong. And a
yes.
big part of that is hormones. I think hormones are the most powerful molecules we have. They're our most powerful signaling molecules. They speak to genes. Nothing else speaks to genes except vitamin D. And that's why it's such a big star on the emergent stage, because it's both a vitamin, meaning we can't make it and need to take it in daily. And also it speaks to genes. And hormones set us up and drive us forward through evolution. And we now have 13, 14-year-old girls that have hormone levels of menopause women. And we have 16, 17, 20-year-old males that have testosterone levels that used to be typical in 60 and 70-year-old men. So hormones are about maintaining health.
Mhm.
And we have less and less hormones because of endocrine disruptors, but it started in the womb and then it continues with this 24/7 exposure.
I'm
So
so
it's
glad you mentioned this to Dave. Every time I go to a biohacking conference, I say exactly the same thing as you. It's where is the discussion on hormones? And like you, I think, well, I want to be inspired by someone who's older than me, who's actually hacked their way and done it really well. And I'm going to listen to them. No, it's easy to talk
for
when you're in your
some
40s.
reason, hormones. Look at Mercola. He is dissing
Oh
hormones,
gosh, he's
dissing estrogen. Is he on testosterone? Yes. Does he want women to
terrible.
be on estrogen? No. So I wrote a huge rebuttal. I write every morning in Substacks except Saturday morning, and write it pinned up. I had this huge rebuttal that's now gone viral. I think it's been over 100,000 downloads on various platforms. But we have a lot of people who are against hormones, don't understand hormones. When the inappropriate messages came out from the Women's Health Initiative, which have now all been proven to be wrong, and got everybody frightened of hormones, thinking they drive cancer, which it turned out was the exact opposite of what was reality. Mind you, I've had breast cancer 33 years ago, and I've been on bioidentical hormone replacement for almost 30 years now. And I wouldn't be who I am today without being on a fair amount of hormones. And although I'm on more hormones than the typical woman, because I wanted to reboot that grand damn tumor suppressor gene P53. But functional cardiologists don't like hormones. They stopped teaching it in med school, naturopathic school, osteopathic school. They stopped teaching hormones. And if you're human, it's human to be down on what you're not up on. So there was a
Mhm.
survey given to gynecologists in 2023, and only 31% of gynecologists had ever taken a course on hormones, and only one course. I mean,
Mhm.
hormones are a tapestry of confusion. You need to be certified in menopausal medicine and andropausal, but now it's happening even younger. So it's not only about older people, it's about we see younger and younger women who have no hormones and they have anxiety and body dysphoria and the part of the higher executive area of the brain that has to do with awareness and decision making is shrinking and they're getting osteopenia and you get them on hormones 13, 14, 15-year-old girls and the body dysphoria goes away and the insomnia goes away and the anxiety goes away. Now, who did this? Who am I talking about? This sounds like blasphemy, hormone blasphemy. Well, Harvard and the neuroendocrine department of General Mass has been publishing long-term year-and-a-half randomized trials, meaning they took young girls and put them on hormones compared to young girls not put on hormones that were in this pickle because many young girls, nothing's not to everybody, are having less hormones. So they actually have closer to a menopausal hormone panel than they do a normal younger girl. So they gave 13 to 24-year-old girls hormone replacement as though they were 60-year-olds and tracked them for a year and a half. And they got rid of all these things that we're seeing in kids these days. The top thing is I don't like my body. I don't like who I'm not well identified with my gender. Out the window with hormone replacement. And then they gave them hormone replacement. They had less anxiety. They had their bone integrity went back to normal and their brain, they did functional MRIs and that part of the brain that was thinning because hormones maintain brain health. That's why my last book was called Sexy Brain because sex steroid hormones rule the brain. And we don't think of that. The
Mhm.
number one way to prevent dementia is to have your hormones balanced and age with hormone replacement therapy because it maintains your piggy bank of your memories, the hippocampus. But they're looking for a drug. It's all about drugs for you to pay a lot of money to make a lot of money for profits when we have a lot of natural answers, but people have been made knee-jerk reflex anti-hormones. And I don't know why the biohackers, maybe because they can't write scripts for it, But a lot of hormones now are even OTC with some really
Mhm.
great companies like Quicksilver Scientific. And I mean, there's lots of companies now making really great over the counter hormone products. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't know why there is so much negativity and fear and ignorance around hormones. And that has become kind of my mission, which is why it's nice to have these conversations, because there's so much misunderstanding, and hormones are a big part, a
Mhm.
truly the hugest part ever of staying younger longer. There's nothing else that helps you stay. And you have to do lots of things. It's not just hormones, but hormones are the foundation. They're the foundation. And when I lecture a lot now, I'm followed by young doctors with their, their phones. What do you eat? What do you take? No, we're not kidding. We're not kidding. We want to know, because they look at you and they go, I always thought that my life would be over after 40, that
Mhm.
it's downhill after that. But to see you, so what the heck do you do? And I always say, what don't I do? But the first thing I do is hormone balancing. And you have to go to somebody. You can't ask your regular doctor that doesn't do hormones, oh, please, can you just test it and put me on it and we'll give it a try? Because hormones they're nuanced and they're complex, and you need somebody who's studied hormones. And that's why I just put on, it was exhausting. It was the largest project of my whole life, more than writing Hormone Deception, which was enormous. That took 6 years to write that book because nobody knew about
Wow.
endocrine disruption then. David Brownstein, I went and was one of the lecturers for A4M in Vegas in December, and there were 5,500 young doctors. And I guess functional medicine is concierge medicine because they had Birkin bags and 5-inch red leather stiletto heels. They were just decked out. And 30 of us got to lecture in the main hall. And half the speakers said hormones are the best anti-aging tool ever. And the other half the speakers said hormones accelerate aging, drive cancer, stay away. And the confusion on their faces was so heart sickening to me. I came home and I called up David Brownstein, who's like a brother to me, and he's got a lot of books out. And his first big selling book was on the importance of bioidentical hormones. And we're like two peas in a pod, David and I. And I said, David, we've got to teach a course for practitioners, A to Z of hormones, bases, delivery modes, efficacy, safety, iodine. Is it safe? Is it not safe for thyroid autoimmune thyroiditis? Let's do this A to Z course so that docs can know this on Monday. And I had to kind of twist his arm because it was a lot of work. And we put it on, excuse me, this April 26th and 27th.
Yes, I remember the YouTube, well, it was a YouTube video I was watching, and I was just blown away because you had Dr. David Brownstein, it was you, Dr. David Rosensweet, and Carol Peterson, and you were talking about the program. I guess it was a kind of a preempt about the program, or because that's where I saw after when I said, okay, you got this program out coming. Is that it? Is that
Right.
was
It was
more or less
called
April?
it was called Everything Hormones, but
Everything
we
hormones.
started advertising for it in February. And we started with Let's Talk Estrogen. So we had Dr. David Rosensweet, we had Dr. Anna DeRosa, we had Carol Peterson, we had David Brownstein, and myself talking about how estrogen does not drive breast cancer. And
Yeah.
in fact, it's actually the opposite. So we started with that, and then we went to Let's Talk Iodine, and then we went to Let's Talk Hormones Q&A, like speed dating. Ask
Yeah.
us any question and we'll speed answer you, like speed dating. And then we launched it was 16 hours of CME online and 11 hours of non-CME. So we went from 6:45 in the morning till 6 at night, 2 days in a row. And now we just put it in an exhaustive effort. We just put it up online evergreen. So it's up there for a year. And it's rare that you can get 16 hours of CME in the convenience of your own home and then have up to a year to claim your CME credits. It's for MDs, nurse practitioners, nurses, and PAs. And
Mhm.
some naturopaths can write their board and see if they get credit for it. We couldn't get credit for chiropractors. They're the hardest board to get CME
Mm.
credits for. But anyway, so we did that to try and train docs because a survey came out in, as I said, I think before 2023, OBGYNs, only 21 to 31% of them have ever had training in hormones.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Very low.
endocrinologists don't have any training in sex hormones. So, and now they've stopped teaching it in schools. So now that hormones are being vindicated again, they're going to have to figure out how to jumpstart some teaching programs. But in the interim, we put on that program. If you have a practitioner that you want to be trained, you could go to my first page of my website, drlindseyberkson.com, DRLINDSEYBERKSON.com, and just scroll down and you'll see everything hormones with Dr. Brownstein's picture and myself. And if you click on that, it tells you if you want to purchase the course.
I'll have a
how to-
link to that, yeah, in the show
Okay.
notes, because I think it's first of all, Everything Hormones is an episode everybody needs to watch. It's just kind of foundational. I even put it in my Biohacking Menopause membership group, is like,
Oh, wow.
start here. And then going through the course as well. So I have a link to the course. I think this is absolutely vital information. And my question to you then is, why, or not why, we know why, but when do you think it will start being required in medical school to teach about hormones and particularly menopause?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's been very odd. Naturopathic colleges in my mind, naturopathic medicine should be the best medicine of all. But I think they're going the path of osteopathic medicine, wanting so much to be medical doctors that they've medicalized their curriculum. And I guess even the Tempe campus, which is now a university, has been bought up by some big pharma laboratory concerns and things. And now they're going more medical, and they're not. I have patients that just graduated naturopathic college and say they were told never prescribe hormones, they cause cancer. And Dr. Brownstein's, both of his daughters are MDs, and they've both just joined him in practice. What an incredible accomplishment that is, a family where they all work in a clinic together. Oh my God, it's like died and gone to heaven. And both of them went to osteopathic school, Haley and Jesse. And I said, what'd you learn about hormones there? And they said, never use them. They drive cancer. End of story. So of all crazy things, Halle Berry, the actress in Hollywood, kind of led a movement in front of a bipartisan Congress about 2 months ago that she was going through perimenopause and was misdiagnosed with a bunch of other stuff. And so why she couldn't get a great functional doc in LA, I don't know. There's a lot of great functional docs in LA, but she was trying to raise money to say that we need doctors to teach menopause and andropause medicine in med school, and that our tax dollars should pay med schools to do this. I think that's crazy. They already have their own tuition. Why should our tax dollars hire more docs? Why can't they do that why is the middle class American always have to be the one that's squeezed in the vice? I don't really like that. And but the bottom line is that when you ask your doctor whether you are a candidate for hormone therapy, you have to realize most doctors have no training to be able to give you a really appropriate answer. And they're good people. They want to help you. They got into medicine to help most people. I mean, I know money's part of it, but most doctors are good people, but it's human nature to be down on what you're not up on. And there's this fear and misconception of hormones. So we're stuck in this no man's land. And I don't know. I would have hoped that naturopathic medicine stood up. I would have hoped they stood up in the pandemic. Like the chiropractic associations were the only ones to say, we feel that our chiropractors are doctors. If you want to wear masks, if they want their patients to wear masks, if they advise them to go get vaccinated, if they don't want to, they don't have to. They're docs. They could do what they want. They were vilified for that. So the naturopaths didn't stand up in the pandemic, and they're not standing up in the hormone debacle that we're going through. And there's not a lot of voices in the darkness of the night. So you got to follow, like David Rosensweet is great. Karen Martell is getting a lot of doctors on. And it doesn't matter if you don't agree on every single point. We don't need to vilify people who don't agree with us totally. If you have 7 cardiologists going to do a stint, you're going to have 7 different ways they advise the stint and the material of the stint and the placement of the stint. That's how medicine is partially an art. So whether should we use estriol along with estradiol, any hormone is better than no hormone. We have learned this through the reanalysis of the Women's Health Initiative, and we're a tiny little community of people trying to sustain and create the importance of hormone health and general overall health, especially soon to be moms and their effect on the following generation. So we don't want to vilify people who don't agree with the way we test a hormone. If you want to use saliva versus 24-hour, God bless you. We need doctors that do hormones, and we need to love each other and be unified and not be upset by some small differences. Some people say you only get great hormone replacement if you have a monthly bleed. A lot of doctors say, no, we don't need to bleed. So if you want to bleed, you try it. If you don't, you don't. There's many ways to take hormones, but we need to honor the voices in the darkness that are trying to shed the light, and bless them all, because this is something that's so important. You want your hormones balanced as you age into your future to achieve a better future. You do.
Mhm. You just wrapped up the whole episode with Karen Martell, and that was such a good one. And you all agreed in that sense that just any hormones are better than none right now. The woman who's listening next, I have to let you go in just 2 minutes. She's probably wondering, well, where do I find a doctor like this? What would you recommend?
Now, that is a fabulous question, and that is easier said than done. Well, the first thing you can do is ask compounding pharmacists in your local area, because they're the ones that fulfill the scripts, and they hear from the patients who's getting good results and who's not. So we actually have an Everything Hormones. We have a talk by Jim Hinseer, who owns Las Colinas Pharmacy outside of Dallas, and he's just opening up a second facility. He's amazing. We have him talk about how you pick a good compounding pharmacist, how you talk to them, how you ask them questions. And of course, you don't have to take the course, but if you go to and compounding pharmacists are healers and brilliant people. I would not be who I am today without compounding pharmacists. You can go chat with them and say, I want to speak to the pharmacist, and who are your docs and what do you think? And so that's a good way to do it. We are compiling a list of people who finish our Everything Hormones course, and we're going to have on our website, but it's not done yet because we just got it up evergreen, because that was an enormous thing to edit those many, many hours of courses and everything and put it up online. And it'll be up online for a year. So I guess it's now 11 months. It'll be up online 11 months longer. So what you also want to do is you really want to read which are the lists of doctors who've been trained. So very soon on Dr. Brownstein's website and on my website, we'll have doctors that took all this course. Now, we had a lot of OBGYN and urologists take it, and we got email and text after email and text that said, I have taken AFM, IFM, I have taken this doctor's course, and this is the first time I really feel solid and safe about how to prescribe hormones, what bases to use, what delivery mode, what dosing I should use. I've never felt this comfortable before. Thank you. And that was what we wanted to accomplish. But there's other people teaching. Rosensweet has the menopause method. Donna White has the BHRT Academy. If I was a young doc getting into hormones, I would take all of these things, and put it all under my belt, because you get pearls from everybody, and then you string together your own jewelry, so with your clinical tools. But as a patient, the first thing would be that. And then I would just say, where did the doc get trained? Where did the doc get trained? And usually the more trainings they've had, the better, because no one person has all the answers. So if you're trained by a variety of different places, you can pick and choose the best of each of those places. So I like doctors that have a list where they've done a lot of training from multiple sources, so that they can then sit back and say, what makes sense to me and the patients that I serve. So it's their training and a compounding pharmacy referrals. And you could go a long way based on that. And then once you get some names, you should call up the front office. That's what they're all about. Say, what's a good time? And remember, to have a great doc, you need to be a great patient. More and more patients are entitled and bullying and hard to deal with. And a doctor's human, and they got to retreat at that energy. So you want to have a great doc. you got to step forward and be a great patient. So when you talk to the front desk, you go, what's a good time for you to have a few minutes to answer some of my questions? Because I know you might be busy. Just don't think you're the only person in the world, to have all this. You don't know how busy, what the office is going through. And set up a time and say, what's the training? What's your feedback? What do you think of this doc? And whatever is important to you. If you like hand holding, does this doc have a good uh, patient doctor skills? But you could be a great surgeon and have terrible patient doctor skills. What's really matters is the hormone skills. So some people don't really care about those things. They just want the hormone skills. But you can talk to the front office and say, this is what's important to me, 1, 2, and 3. Where's your doctor sit on 1, 2, and 3? And that's the homework you need to do. And then sometimes you can I don't do any introductory calls anymore. I used to when I was younger and, seeing patients, but I don't do that. I'm close to mainly just teaching and just seeing very, very few patients a week because I spend almost up to 3 hours with them. I really like to dive into cancer patients. That's my really favorite thing to do. But I think, is that helpful?
Yes, you absolutely have got to get me this list or the link when all the doctors are set up, because I have a list of how to find a doctor. I have resources on my website. The podcast episode that was released just before this one talks to you how to find the doctor, which is everything that you've said here. And the top questions to ask the doctor when you get your appointment. And number one was just the one that you mentioned as well, about what are your credentials. So we are very much in alignment, and I'm really excited to see your list of doctors so we can help women, because that's a question I get all the time is, okay, I agree with what you're saying, but how do I find a doctor? So I'm going to let you go now because you have got to run to your rest of your day and your clinic and everything that you do. I just want to say I appreciate so much that you're on here. I didn't realize this episode was going to turn into an endocrine disruptor talk in the first half. We did get into the hormones, the second talk. I would love to talk more about breast cancer as well, perhaps in the next episode. But thank you so much, Dr. Berkson, for coming on the Hack My Age podcast.
Well, thank you for all of your work and making these transparent, necessary conversations available. What an absolute gift that is to our society and community. So blessings right back at you.
Take care. Wonderful day to you and everyone else who's listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.